Good to see you, Alan.
Yeah. Another week.
And how's your week so far?
It's been good. Yeah.
It's I'm really happy you're doing this podcast, at a time when there's so many things to talk about, especially in the tech ecosystem in Africa. I mean, the year is just starting. So many things to talk about. I remember growing up actually in Kibra, and I know you actually grew up in Kibra as well, and I think that's where we met as well.
Yeah.
In Taa, we used to see a lot of USAID trucks. A lot of USAID trucks moving around, helping with healthcare stuff, and all that. Do you remember seeing them?
Yeah. Mostly walikuwa wanafanya delivery kama Carolina for Kibera.
Yes.
Carolina
Kibera was at Carolina was Kibera at Olympic.
Yeah.
There used to be MSF up still.
MSF
Yeah. Well, a lot of memories, yeah. But I think growing up in Kibra was so much fun. And
life inaweza ina change.
I know a lot of things change, but yes, so happy for you, have you on this podcast. And this podcast, I wanted to discuss something very interesting that is happening right now, and it's affecting so many things. Maybe first, let me ask you a question. What do you know of USAID?
So I think a person mwenye nimekuwa kwa in terms of like engaging na non-profits. The time yenye nilikuwa Turkana, that's where mostly pia
Turkana with what's the name of that institution?
Nini uko Learning Lions.
Yes, Learning Lions, yeah.
So I nimekuwa nikiassociate like USAID na ile humanitarian work in terms of like kupeana wakati wa disasters pia they come through. So juzi actually ndio nimerealize kumbe they give grants for more things. Na pia like sikuwa nimerealize like how much they have they play like key role in terms of, for instance, healthcare projects za agriculture. But in most cases utawapata working very closely na UNICEF, UNHCR. Hizo ni hizo organization basically za kupeana msaada.
And I'm glad you mentioned healthcare, because one of the biggest USAID is basically aid from USA. So I think a big chunk of the funding and support that always comes from USAID is always supported by the US government, if I'm not wrong. And the reason we're having this podcast is because I want us to focus on health tech in Africa. As we all know, Africa has quite a very interesting startup ecosystem, and one of the startups that play a big role in Africa are startups in healthcare, or what they're called Healthtech. And these startups have been big beneficiaries of USAID. In fact, USAID supports health tech startup in Africa primarily through, funding mechanism. Like they have a fund. I was just trying to do that when I was doing my research about this podcast. So they have a fund called the Development Innovation Ventures, DIV program, that provides grants to promising African health tech companies to scale their solutions, particularly those addressing critical healthcare needs like malaria treatment, while also working to build supportive ecosystems for digital health through capacity building initiatives and partnerships with local government and health organizations to integrate this tech into existing healthcare systems. So USAID has been supporting a lot of these health tech startups, and the reason we're talking about these startups and USAID is because of just the recent announcement by the Trump administration.
Another announcement.
Exactly. I mean, what do you know of this announcement?
I think it's still part of his long-term disruption plans, if I may say so. As in, like, I think he wants the world to feel the power of US, the US government. So basically it comes as an announcement to freeze it's called stop work order on any foreign development grants given na USAID. So it had started off ilikuwa imeanza as more of both local na foreign aid. But then I think the Supreme Court in the US ika stop the order on domestic aid. Gambia, he has no power to stop domestic aid. So the domestic aid ikakuwa restored because that one was going to have a ripple effect to like students. Kulikuwa na, especially like given the healthcare system ya US ilikuwa plunge into a very serious crisis because of that order. So I think now what is on the table right now ni kwamba the foreign aid ndio sasa imesuspendiwa imesuspendiwa with the domestic aid continuing. So as of now, I think there's still more conversation in terms of like what that means. But I think also so basically it's like stopping any foreign aid from the US. Then now hakuna mahali imesema ati for until further notice ni just stop.
Stop. And it's like I was reading it's a 90-day freeze. So I'm not sure if that means after the 90 days they reconsider that ban. But earlier today I saw USAID release a statement on their website. And so today is 7th.
5th.
On Friday, 7th, 2025, all USAID direct hire personnel will be placed on administrative leave globally. With the exception of designated personnel responsible for mission-critical functions, core leadership, and specially designated programs. Essentially, personnel expected to continue working will be informed by agency leadership by Thursday, 6th. For USAID personnel currently posted outside the United States, the agency is in coordination with missions and the Department of State is currently preparing a plan in accordance with all applicable requirements and laws under which the agency will arrange and pay for return travel to the United States within 30 days and provide a termination of PSC and ICSC contracts that are now determined to be essential. The agency will consider case-by-case exemptions and return travel extensions based on personal or family hardships, mobility or safety concerns or other reasons. For example, the agency will consider exceptions based on the timing of dependent school term, personal or family medical needs, pregnancy, and other reasons. Further guidance on how to request an exception will be forthcoming. So it basically tells you how big this is. It's a serious thing. Let me just go back to now healthcare startups in Africa. So as I said, USAID supports a lot of African startups through a fund.
The fund,
a fund that, they've been doing this for years since USAID was established a couple of years back. So the fund, as I said, it's called the Development Innovation Venture Fund, that is supporting a lot of African startups. And so basically that means a lot of these startups, healthcare startups that have been depending on USAID for funding, are going to basically halt or stop. Yes.
I would say generally, tukiongelea like in terms of like how much that, what that means. It means like, for instance, take an example. TechTrends was expecting from USAID $50,000.
Yes, I want that $50,000.
Inamaanisha getting that letter of we are sorry, the expected investment won't be coming. That one, it means most of them either have to shut down, ama by the time they get new funding, they will have fallen into serious expenses. Right? And then also considering like how unapatanga Healthtech systems zao ni very, very sophisticated in terms of development. So zinakuwa na development cycles long. Because kitu yenye na deal na mwanadamu wezi anza kusema utalaunch and then you go test it a bit and then come. No, so it's something ambayo unapata they need like a lot of funding, upfront funding. Ndio wafanye yani clinical tests. They go through the medical peer like certifications, licensing and all that. So for me now, with that, there are a lot of innovations, tech innovations, health that were bound to launch this year that we might never see again because of that funding freeze.
And a good example is the article I sent you, the link I sent you just before we came to this podcast, about the story we've done on the TechTrends website about investing in innovation. Is a I3 that has made some change to the third cohort of it. This program they run to support, the future of pharmacy care in Africa. So they work closely with a lot of healthcare startup in the pharmacy space, and now they've been forced to actually change. The shift focus to working or to just inviting growth stage African Healthtech to support to join the program.
They were to support 15 startups, 10 early stage, 5 growth stage. So I think with the ban, they focused only the 5 growth stage startups because itakubaliwa. Then the 10 early stage zimekuwa basically think put on hold. So which means ndio maana kwa sema like all those innovation solutions, all those founders itabidi wamerudi sasa back milestones kadhaa. Ndio sasa they have like to apply to another fund. Then from there now which means a lot of most of them, they might not be able to recover in terms of in terms of expenses. There's also possibility also most of them what a pivot to something different from what they were developing.
But my question is this a wake up call? Because a lot of African startups really depend on foreign aid, or let me say foreign funding. In fact, as a person who really covers startups and writes about startups, it's very rare for us to hear about local investors investing in African startups. In fact, a huge chunk of African startups get funding from
Silicon Valley.
From Silicon Valley, exactly.
I think them.
Yes. So, do you think, it's now for us to start having conversation around local investors or African investors investing in African startups?
I think the first thing in it happen is for African governments to start now walking the talk. To watch the big talk.
I love that.
To watch the big talk in terms of we support innovation, we have plans for our startups. Kenya tuko na startup bill yenye imeshindanga kizungushwa. We have incentives, lazima wafanye hivi, lazima wafanye vile. I think hatujawahi experience what the effects of not investing in research for years.
That's right. And just before you do that, I want us to play this clip from the former President Uhuru Kenyatta. You remember what he was saying? He was talking about mbona mnalia, make things work, stop complaining about. So I want you to listen to that clip and tell me what you think.
Former President Uhuru Kenyatta has challenged the government to stop complaining about President Donald Trump's order freezing grants and loans, which will affect provision of drugs for HIV, malaria, and TB. Speaking in Mombasa while attending the East Africa Health Summit, the former president said President Trump has no reason to fund any programs in the country and the African continent. Uhuru says the move by the U.S. is a wake-up call for Africa to utilize available resources and come up with mechanisms on how to fund key programs funded by the U.S. Kenyatta is asking African leaders to avert regional conflict in DRC and Sudan, saying conflicts are derailing development in the continent.
World Health Organization. Really quick.
Okay. And this is a wake-up call for you to say, okay, what are we going to do to help ourselves?
instead of crying, tujiulize, what are we going to do? Haya, ametoa hiyo pesa, sasa tutafanya namna gani jameni? What are we going to do? Yeah? To support ourselves. Because nobody is going to continue holding out a hand there to give you. It is time for us to use our resources for the right things. We are the ones who are using them for the wrong things. Yeah? The bullets and the guns we buy, we're not given for free. We buy them. And we're not buying them to go and fight wars off our shores. We are fighting our own people. Hapa too.
So what Uhuru is basically talking about is saying, yeah, stop crying that the US is stopping funding to your governments or to your initiative. Make things work.
Yeah.
Of course, he was president. He should have made things work as well. But yeah, he has a point. He has a point actually. That is
because I think in that clip, he was addressing the African nation presidents. Yeah, right. Because ikitu for many years haijakuwa Africa hatujawahi experience the need mahali what it means to be free. And I think for instance the new presidents were Senegal, Burkina Faso, when they are talking about African nations being free of foreign control, I think hatuja experience. Saa hizi someone like Trump, he wants us to with his actions we will feel it.
Yeah.
Na I'm glad, not that atina nafurahia ati sasa people will die because of but I'm glad amefanya hiyo action because people in power they have to wake up na waanze ku walk the talk. Because unajua saizi when someone is starting a company to offer, for instance, insurance to like low income families, offer healthcare distribution, medical distribution, and you find most of these even innovations most of the African wengi wameingia into software development na nini, but you end up as a startup founder unless you have another founder mwenye atakulink up to the Silicon Valley. Outer manage.
I mean, how many times have we seen a lot of this conversation around for an African startup to be successful?
Yeah.
There has to be a white finder hapo mbele leading the conversation. I mean, it's there. That conversation is always there.
Iko hapo and we have had it. The main issue is African governments, we talk about innovation and building Konza City and all that. Konza City cannot survive if hatuna innovation fund.
Yeah.
Kama hatuna like an actual, for instance, like hata kama ni a way of accessing funds za innovation na research, if there is no that kind of fund, tunafanya bure. And that's what now these startups mingi za Africa, especially in this even like for instance humanitarian aid utarealize like saizi Red Cross.
Yeah.
Is it an African agency? No. USAID, African agency? No. UNHCR, African agency? No. So at the end of the day, CC, we have now to figure out the same way. I mean, it's easy. I like what China is doing. China realized no, hatuna seat on the table. How do we create a seat on the table? Let us pool resources zenye tuko nazo, and they realized the first resource zenye tuko nayo is the 1.something billion people wenye tuko nao.
So let's invest in these
people.
Let's
invest in them.
Yeah.
And then now slowly with that pool of resources and people being at work, right, the country started regaining the financial muscle. Africa combined, other EU, African Union and nini, I would like to challenge, because I've not seen it put a press release of an alternative aid to USAID. Put it.
Yeah.
It's a wake-up call for the African Union to say, African countries, don't worry, we have you covered. This is the fund that can be able to cushion the African nations for the next 10 years.
Do you think was it Gaddafi's dream of is the United States of Africa? Is it, what was the name?
ni Gaddafi.
Yeah, Gaddafi's he had a dream of a united Africa would have solved such challenges.
It would. The challenge ni kwamba alienda the solo way. Because ukiangalia man like Libya, the country itself, he had shown it. Yes, alikuwa dictator to some point, but when he meant that ule mwananchi wa chini ataishi maisha ambayo ni average, he did it. Whether it meant silencing everyone else who did not agree. Yes, with that dictatorship na yeye kuishi lavish, but he lived akijua one thing that my country has ni hii gold yenye ni black. I'm going to use it to make sure mwananchi yeyote ataishi an average life. And you know, in Africa an average life inamaanisha kitu kubwa sana.
Exactly. You know, I think one thing we really fail to appreciate as Africans is how rich we are as a continent. You know, you see a lot of, we were talking about healthcare startups. You see the interesting products, the interesting healthcare initiatives. A lot of these startups are building Africa, very bright young people, you know. But I feel, you know, we really don't get enough support as we should from our own governments. And that's why I know people like USAID come in. That's why we need people, pesa ikatwa kidogo, we start crying. You know, but what we fail to understand is, you know, we need to first understand the geopolitical factors behind USAID foreign aid and other issues. Like, you know, who decides where the money goes? You know? Pesa si yetu, pesa ni yao, just the way Uhuru said, you know. So they decide where the money goes, And just moving that from that, how now do we ensure, you know, African government and even business, and even these startups, you know,
because in a flow, even towards these other startups, saizi ukiangalia even the definition of a startup, definition yake, we borrow it from Silicon Valley. Africa tuko na SMEs, hatuna startups. Ukweli ndio hiyo. So,
and even when these startups are trying to raise funding, I mean, I've met so many of them naenda Silicon Valley.
Itabidi kwa sababu if you are using kama ni agreements za kufundraise, Nick, if you don't use SAFE, which is one of the early stage agreements, standardized agreements, zenye that was developed in our Y Combinator, you find most of the investors you present your idea to, they don't understand that agreement. Ukiweka standard agreements za huku, they don't. Ukikuja hapa ground, unarealize hatuna definition ya startup. Juzi ndio nilikuwa nakuja kulearn. A startup basically ni for you to get your venture funding, they look at startups that have high growth. Wanatumia exponential growth, which Africa tuko na exponential growth. The only way to create that is through tech. So which ukiangalia technology, tech startups mingi ndizo zinaendeanga the funding, which so ukiangalia from the local pool, hatu uanze kutafuta for instance like even the wealth managers Africa na nini, fund managers, investment banking na nini. Most of the investors were inje. From the so rest, when you approach them, they still want you to meet the demands of their investors. So at the end of the day, hakuna ile uhuru to navigate the African market without the rules za outside funding. So I think majorly at the moment, given now how critical we are seeing things going, it's time, and I think many presidents in Africa have mentioned it, kwamba it's time that Africa goes to the table with something. Tuache kukua tunaitwa. Because at the end of the day, if kama una chako, at the end of the day you will feed from the hands of your master. Exactly, so at the end of the day is tuache kusema tulikombolewa 1963 na sahi
and when they do that, They own you. When you give them money, they own you. I mean, look at, for example, what is happening with, we've had this conversation around IMF in Africa, deciding how much food should cost, deciding how much fuel, all these things, So when they give you that money, they own you. But let me just cycle back a little. Beyond aid, beyond aid, beyond what these healthcare startups, dependence on USAID and all these other venture capitals, how can they build sustainable business models? Because we've had these conversations before, even in previous podcast episodes, like, a lot of these startups, they survive on funding. So funding stops, the startups die.
The same way na NGO.
Yeah.
Saa hizi NGO mingi zenye zilikuwa zinangojea grant, especially zile zenye you find like zile zenye zilikuwa zina unapata they are involved in like supporting like low income areas, rural areas. Mingi zenye sahi already this year kuna wenye waliamuka wakijua most NGOs zilikuwa zinajua we have the next grant funding is coming this January. But we didn't know nini. I think nani had given it a hint but of course hatukuangi prepared. Na hiyo ni shida. It's something we need to take positively na to learn. One thing we have now to do is the same way hata kabla tungoje government ifanye kitu ni we have to start using one mechanism ambaye Africans walitumia kitambo. We have used it for many generations, which is resource pooling. Kenya tunaita chama, the chama style, we have the circle style. The same way, unaona kitambo, people used to pool, wanakuja pamoja, wanalima, and then wanavuna, wanagawana. There used to be that communal mechanisms we used to have. So we were surviving without money, but then ulikuwa unajua neighbor, mtoto wa neighbor wako haezi lala njaa na uko na chakula. We used to come together and till the land, then plant, then come together again, tunavuna na tunagawana. So the same way, yes, the world has now moved to be more capitalistic and we are more urbanized and all that, but let us now stop having few rich people, right? And let us have more. Kama ni, you see the way billionaires in the US come together, mtu akishafika amefika level ya billionaire, they create that's where Silicon Valley iko. Someone is able to put their money and that money trickles down to someone else who is innovating in the same space, right? While the same person still remains rich because it's their money being used. So it's also a wake-up call for rich people in Africa, billionaires in Africa, to see it as an investment opportunity. What if we stop having a mythical Silicon Savannah and have the fund, Silicon Valley, which is equal true. Yani, the billionaires wanaekelea pesa, it's an investment, and they invest in these people themselves. Not that the government lazima ikuwe ina initiate what na nini. Let us look at it as an investment opportunity. Let's say you have succeeded in that industry. You already someone who is developing a solution in the same industry, and as an investor, transition now to be an investor in that person. That way the innovation will be homegrown. Otherwise, if we are waiting for like resources pulled outside, then it becomes a bit challenging because it's not our money, like you said. So the only way we create our money is for the rich to create the fund, and then now create the system. Once we have the fund, unaona tukiwa tuseme tuko na IMF yetu. Once we have the money, you now create systems of how it flows. The same way China pulled the money, now they have the systems of how it flows. And that's what unaona, because China is a socialist country, they come still with that spirit and they say, okay, look guys, nyinyi na sisi, we share the same thing, which is socialism. So sisi tunakuja at the end of the day hatuta kudanganya ati hatutaki faida. Pesa yetu lazima irudi. But because sisi tuko na watu tunafaa to create jobs for in our country. Nyinyi mko na resources na sisi tuko na pesa. Simu create employment for our people. We give you the money, you pay it back with a lower interest, right? But then from there our people have gotten jobs, right? And you guys have also developed your own economies, right? The other thing we need to learn as Africans is we spend today, we don't save for tomorrow. If we did what we have to, I think it has to now, it has also like personally, for instance, like saving for tomorrow. Disasters Africa una realize like zikikam inatumalizanga. You atuna, we don't have enough long-term savings that we know 100 years from now Africa ipate disaster ya kitu kama earthquake. We have the funds. 10 years from now, achana na 5.
Problem is when we put leaders in positions of power, hoping they'll help us, they always think, no, it's our time to aid, and they forget about us.
Challenge,
all right. Thank you so much, Ala. I mean, it's a very big conversation. We've seen how already in Kenya alone, thousands, tens of thousands of projects and people are already been told don't come to the office on Monday because there's no money. And USAID has been playing a very big role in supporting these healthcare startups or just healthcare projects across Kenya. President Uhuru, in the video we played, of course, earlier, and the clip and the audio you heard earlier, he called on us, governments, like now it's a wake-up call. But, one thing at least we both agree is this freeze is going to have a very serious impact for health tech startups in Africa, right? Of course, as I said, we've seen it already have already leading to immediate disruptions in essential services, including healthcare initiatives. And it has also resulted in substantial layoffs within international development organizations. And for African health techs, many of which are relying on USAID or US funding for research, development, operational cost, this freeze could lead to a lot of health projects, delayed innovation, and even financial instability. So again, jobs are going to be lost. And big programs, for example, the USAID malaria vaccine development program, it's a very big program. And you know how malaria is big in Africa. So that's going to be affected, right? And so again, we both agree that now it's time for these health techs to now seek alternative funding sources.
I think generally it also imeonyesha how fragile our economies are. So I think it's if we don't strengthen our economy, both as countries and then now the African bloc as a whole. Honestly, like economies zetu ziko over reliant on and it's not just aid. Look at how much the foreign loans zinatuchoke. How much like foreign wars zinatu affect in terms of like distribution ya vitu kama wheat. Unaona, distribution ya vitu kama mafuta and all that. Ukiangalia one of the countries zenye, for instance, Congo, a country that has potential to power Africa with the electricity for many years. Ikona potential ya in terms of agriculture to produce food yenye inaweza supply Africa mzima. The country itself is in war. Unaona? So at the end of the day, hatuwezi sema if we continue waiting ati sasa until US iko involved in your country kama and your country kama Congo can have stability, itakuwa a challenge. Now also we have to start now being also a little bit I know this will be controversial, but sometimes Trump pisses me off when because honestly that is being selfish. No. And if he wants now every country to be selfish, then it's also incentive enough for the countries of Africa to be angry enough and be selfish. And wambia sasa kama wewe huwezi peana, then you'll also buy. Honestly, mimi ningekuwa in the position of power, the kind of anger yenye ningekuja on the table with, because this guy is like, you guys are trash. Everything you have is mine.
I own you.
Yeah, I own you. So if African states hawatakuwa angry for this when we have power, then I don't know which time tunangojea. Because kina Kenyatta, Nandi, all the other presidents, they got angry and we got the independence. But saizi, we are choking from colonialism. Unaona? So ile kitu yenye nani amekuja nayo na Trump ni selfishness. So if it's going to be selfishness, then let us tusikue reactive, yes, but now let us be angry and invest in our
and find
people.
solutions. Because just as we wind up, these geopolitical shifts are really crazy. Because and this over dependence on foreign aid is also a very bad thing. Kenya, for example, we depend so much from China, from Russia, from this country. What if China also woke up one day and said, no, we're not giving you loans of money? What if Russia said, no, we're not going to import any fertilizer in your country? So this over dependence is also very bad. So we need to be really aware of this geopolitical shifts and how they're going to affect us, and just prepare for that. And that's where actually now governments come in. That's where these startups need to find for alternative funding models and build products that actually can also help them. Just
I think also pia tuache kutengeneza systems that are borrowed. Constitution yetu borrowed. Funding models yetu borrowed. Governance yetu borrowed. Sasa umuta ko like aya nikikaa chini mnatumia constitution yenyewe mnatumia muliboro.
Thank you.
It's either like we go kama 20 the British way, we are going the US way. I'm like, where is the African way? That is how I can end.
The African way. And I think that's where a good starting point to actually end the conversation. And of course, we're going to be following this closely. I'm going to try get a few, because there's an article I'm working on around the same, how this impact is going to affect a lot of health tech startups. So I'm going to get to talk to a lot of these startup founders in the health tech sector, just get their perspective and their way forward, their plan, and even just to get to understand really how massive this effect is going to have on them. So that's it for this latest episode 5, season 3 of our TechTrends Podcast. My name is Nick Kanali.
My name is Alan.
And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.